Welcome back to the BounceBack, a leadership show where we talk so much about having your biggest setback, allowing you to have your biggest bounce back. So I'm so glad to have you on with us today. I'm so glad to see you here. We've got a special guest coming up, but before I get to that, I want to make sure that I cover a few other things. So we have, like I said, a special guest coming on today, but we also have so much to be thankful for. We just celebrated Thanksgiving. I was ill quite a lot of Thanksgiving, but being able to bounce back from that really meant so much to me because it was hard. And I'm sure you have similar instances where you have hard things that you go through that you're not sure if you're going to be able to bounce back from. I wasn't sure I was going to be able to bounce back. It was a very difficult thing for me to go through. Somebody that knows a lot about bouncing back from her setbacks is our special guest coming on today. We have a special guest coming on tomorrow or next week as well. But without any further ado, I want to bring on our special guest today. And that is none other than Dr. Candy Campbell. And I'll see if I can get you out of the green room. Candy, if you'll join us, that would be so nice. Here we go. Let's see. There you are.
Hey.
Hey.
Good to see you, Brian.
It's good to see you, Candy. I'm so happy you're able to join us this morning.
My pleasure.
So Candy, tell me, when is your first recollection of having a setback that you had to bounce back from?
I was 21 years old, and I was not able to realize my dream of becoming a repertory actor. Mm-hmm. I had graduated with a degree in theater and acting, and I had won a full ride scholarship over to the University of Minnesota in conjunction with their Guthrie Theater for a master's in fine arts. And what happened was that we were in the space race in the early 70s, and they decided that year to take a lot of the money from arts and put it into STEM. And so I got a telegram in the summer after I graduated, just when I was, gearing up for this. I told everybody we'd had celebration parties and I'm going to go and be able to do this. And then I got this telegram that said, well, all of your grant and work study package that they had has been cut in half. And maybe you should borrow some money from your parents or whatever. They counseled me about this. Now, my parents were already retired. I'm sort of the late kid in the family. They didn't have any money. And Sally Mae and Freddie Mac didn't even exist, or maybe they were in the first hatchings. I don't know. But there were no loans. And so I thought, well, I'll just bounce back from this. I'll go to New York. And so that summer, I got cast in a production for summer stock. gearing up for going to New York to make my fame and fortune as an actor. And I had what we used to call a casting couch experience. Now I think they call it kind of a Me Too moment, when the director put moves on me, shall we say. And it surprised me because I knew this guy. I had worked with him before, and I had even babysat for his wife and his children. So I was really shocked. And I basically pushed him across the room and said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Well, you're going to New York. This is the way the game is played." And I said, "Not for me. See ya." And he said, "Okay, see you tomorrow." And I said, "No, you don't get it. I mean, I'm done." He said, "What do you mean? You can't quit. We open in 3.5 weeks." I said, "I'm out of here." And I was the lead. So I stopped acting for over a decade.
Wow.
And I will tell you, it took me about 20 years to really get over the pain of that and figure out how to bounce back. It was more like dribbling back. And in the meantime, though, I got the call to be a nurse. So I never would have done that. And that was a good thing. And, there have been other large setbacks in my life, but that was the first one.
Wow. If you want to hear more, stay right there. Wow, what a story, Candy! And you've taken that story and you've mixed it with you've taken those two stories, the acting and the nursing, and you've kind of put them together.
I did. And I'll tell you, that didn't happen until the next big setback, which was that I had you might call it a traumatic divorce. I had to sort of run in the middle of the night for safety and travel to family from Southern California to Northern California to start a new life. And I had not acted really for over a decade, as I mentioned. And when I knew that I had to start life as a single mom with kids who were 8, 11, and 13 with no support, I was very thankful that I was at least trained as a nurse and could find work. It wasn't, it was one of those times when a job didn't just fall into my lap, but I did find work, and happily so. The kids and I started making new friends, plugged into different community groups. It was all okay, but it's very painful to have to start that life all over. And after a few months, I thought to myself, what I really want to do is just laugh again. I'm tired of being tired and sick and tired. I don't want to be a victim. I just want to find the funny. And I had been a comic actor, so I enrolled in a stand-up comedy class. And from that, I learned that everybody in this stand-up comedy class, there were about 8 of us, were taking improv. And they seemed to be a lot more fluid on stage, even though I'd done some improv in college, but I hadn't studied it in the way that it was being studied in the early 90s. And so I enrolled, and honestly, it changed my life. Within a few months, I'll tell you, 3 of my comedy class friends and I decided, we got it. We're going to branch off. We co-founded an improv and stand-up comedy company in San Francisco and started performing. We were together for about 3 years. And that, I can look back and say that everything that's happened since then, the books, the shows, the film, everything started when I finally said, I'm just sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I'm going to laugh again. Darn it.
Yeah. Wow, that's awesome. So tell me, you talked about your books.
Mm.
What's the latest book?
The latest book is, oops, it's up there. It's
Ah,
called Improv to Improve Your Leadership Team. The first one in the series is Improv to Improve Healthcare. So that was after performing improv. What happened was that in 1995, one night we were invited to come train leaders in a startup company in Silicon Valley there in the San Francisco area. And I was the one who had a minor in ed and knew something about curriculum development. So I took it on. And that was the first time I had done that. And you know something, Brian, there were two big lessons from that very first time of teaching people the principles of improv without expecting to do any performance. You know, it's a totally different thing. Shall I tell you?
how is it different?
Well, when you're training for performance, you're looking for the funny, generally speaking,
Mm-hmm.
right? And as in stand up, you're always thinking about words and phrases and all sorts of things like that. But when you're teaching the principles of improvisation from not just from theater, but from all of the arts, I wrap them up. What happens is you concentrate on the relationships that are in the room. And the first lesson that I got afterwards, because I was a little scared when I came into this room of about a dozen leaders, they are all like this, you know, they were told they
Mm-hmm.
had to be there. And they're like, ugh, all they knew of improv was a TV show, which is, you know, highly curated and produced. And they had no idea that this would do anything to improve. And afterwards, when they had such a good time, they formed new relationships, and I saw that they were able, without thinking of performance, they were able to take the principles and transform problems spontaneously into creative ideas. Like I said, they had so much fun. Afterwards, they're like, I can't believe I'm now a friend of this guy that I couldn't stand before, et cetera, et cetera. It's a kind of a domino effect. And I felt so good to have been a part of making a difference in these lives. The second lesson to me, this light bulb went on, that it was really a lot more fulfilling to facilitate these sorts of workshops than it was actually to perform comedy.
Really?
Yeah, because it had a lasting effect.
Yeah. So what have you done with that since then?
Well, you know, these groups, the improv groups and all, unless you're maybe the groundlings or something, and those people are, you know, the same actors are not there the whole time. But we didn't have we weren't highly produced, you know. Taking we were renting theaters when they were dark, and we would go to old folks' homes and coffee shops, and we were everywhere, you know, wherever we could find a gig, make a gig. So it was an amorphous group. After about 3 years, you know, people moved away. We broke up, and what happened was that I had already booked. We had booked a gig for one of my professional organizations as a nurse, and I was told, well, you know, it's not going to happen now, so we'll have to give them back the money. They had given us 50% up front. It wasn't a lot, but it meant something to me. And this was my organization. I
Yeah.
didn't want to lose face with them. So I said, no, 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 I'm not giving them money back. I'll give them something else. And seriously, I flat out put my face on the floor, cried out to God, what am I going to do? I had no idea. And within 3 weeks, I had a total show. It was kind of what they call a trunk show. I did several characters. It was comedy. It was silly.
Huh.
And they loved it. That was my first of now 3 solo shows.
Huh.
Mm,
That's awesome.
yeah.
I love it. So you have a lot going on. You're very busy. I see you traveling a lot. Who sees your blind spots?
Who sees my blind spots? Well, I a friend of mine that I've known for many, many years, when we hadn't talked to each other for, oh gosh, life gets in the way sometimes, and it was a couple of years since she and I had talked. And we'd been friends since high school. And she said, it's so good to talk together again because our friendship is like old shoes, old slippers. We can just slip into them whenever possible. And so I make it ever since that time, and that was when I was having children. Ever since that time, I've made it a habit to keep in touch with people that I've known for a long time, not all since childhood, but people that are good friends. That's one small group that I've known for a long time because there's nothing they don't know. Well, I don't have secrets anyway. I'm not that kind of a person. I don't have secrets. But if I need to vent or work through a problem, I can go to them. Plus, there are other groups like the one we met in from the National Speakers Association. We have a lot of things in common. And we go there to work out problems and all and get real with each other. So that's how we do it.
Yeah, well, that's good. That's good. And I feel the same way. So it's a good thing. Wow. So what does the next level of success look like for you?
The next level of success. Well, we're recording this at the end of the year. So for me, it's looking at what I didn't accomplish this year and what has been on the horizon of things that I do want to accomplish, God willing, while the health's, if the health is there and I'm young enough to still, be productive. As a nurse, I'm always aware that we're all one breath away from eternity. I don't want to take anything for granted. But, one of the gifts that I have is memory. And, my third solo show is An Evening with Florence Nightingale, the Reluctant Celebrity. And she and I have been, one of my daughters said, Mother, when you say she and I, it sounds like you're like mental. You're just pretending to be somebody else. I'm like, oh yeah, okay. Well, I feel very ingratiated to the woman that Florence Nightingale was. And let me just say a little sidebar. The show was something that I didn't plan on doing. Again, another sort of happy accident. And what happened was that in 2010, it was the 100th anniversary of her death, which is kind of a weird thing to celebrate. But I was a professor then at the University of San Francisco. And during a faculty meeting, one of our wonderful school librarians who was assigned to our college of nursing and health professions came in and said, did you all know that this is the 100th year anniversary? And we're like, yeah, we knew. And she said, but didn't you know that all of her 200 books and articles and over 10,000 of her letters that we have extant are now digitized for this anniversary? And we have them free. So come on down. And to my knowledge, she used to tell me, you're the only one who's here reading these things. And it took me 3 years.
3 years?
3 years to
you read them all?
Yeah. Yeah. And I keep reading them because, and so then I figured out, because the librarian, she was really great. She goes, and what are you going to do with all this? I said, I don't know. I kind of feel like I'm reading a novel. It's just, it was page turning stuff to me. Just even her little letters to like her eye doctor and things, she suffered from eye problems. The last 5 years of her life, she was basically totally blind. I'm pretty sure it was glaucoma. I don't remember exactly if it was diagnosed, but I know she had problems. But even the way she wrote letters to people, she did a lot of favors. She was very generous in her life, using her platform and her celebrity status. She was a devout Christian who knew that when she survived this terrible illness that she contracted during her time at the very end of the Crimean War, before she traveled home, she and the doctors weren't even sure she was going to live. And every day she'd get up, take stock of the body and, thank God and figure out how much maybe energy she had to carry on for one more day. And that is why she was so purpose driven. Her mission and vision was clear. She was going to fight disease and unnecessary death. She was going to help reform the British military system. She was going to fight for women's rights, and education, and for good housing and food for the poor. I mean, she was global in her aspirations because she thought, well, if my life was spared, she never married for the reason that she wanted to, but she realized that, no husband of that era would have allowed, in her social class, would have allowed a wife to work, because it would have cast aspersions on his ability to provide. And she, so she just said, okay, if the celibate life is going to be the life I lead, then I will. But that means I have to work hard, especially, like I said, after she got sick. And she just knew that for one more day, every day, it's almost like the Alcoholics Anonymous thing, I'll do this one more day. And you see it all over her writing.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I did a whole study of that. And
how old was she when she died?
90.
90?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. And she was the most surprised.
Wow.
Especially after she was blind and she was dictating letters. She didn't stop. She just then dictated letters, and was very generous in all of her worldly possessions as well as her knowledge.
That's incredible. So, can you tell me, what's the best advice you've ever gotten?
The best advice I've ever gotten. There was a time, and I'm sure that probably everybody who's listening, who's an adult, can understand that there are times when you just feel so low, you just can't see a future. And for me, that was right after that first setback. And I remember just nothing seemed to be going well with me, really. And my best friend, her mother, was my champion since we were in 6th grade. She knew that, or she was a woman who was full of faith and full of hope in so many ways. She was the kind of person that people used to go to, well, like me. I wasn't related to her. And she would have people dropping in from the neighborhood, from the community, the church, whatever, just to talk with her. She was like the wise old woman, and she made herself accessible to people. And one day, she met my mom over at the grocery store, and I had moved back home after college. I had nowhere to go and no prospects. I was really in a low place. And my mom saw her at the store. And of course, Ruth was her name. She asked how I was doing. And my mom said, I wish you'd call her. So she did. And she invited me over for tea. And we sat there and I just cried. I just didn't know, if I was given these gifts, why I wasn't being allowed to use them, and so forth and so on. And she just said, and I wasn't plugged into any sort of religious faith or anything at the time. I sort of wandered away from that. And that was a long wander for like 12 years. And she, without proselytizing me or anything like that, she just blessed me. She said, you need to just know that you were created for a purpose. And just because the purpose is not revealed to you yet, it doesn't mean that you were not created for a purpose. You are unique. She mentioned about everybody's fingerprints and so forth and so on. And it's clear because of all the things that had happened, all the accolades that I've had previously and everything. She said, it's clear that you're going to achieve great things, but we just don't know what they are yet. So be patient and just have faith. Well, I didn't really have much faith at all. And then I told her that. And she said, well, there's a scripture that says, if you have faith like a mustard seed, it can grow like an oak tree. And, I sort of hid that little thing in my heart for a long time, and it did grow. It did grow.
That's awesome. That means so much to us and to our listeners. And by the way, our listeners, if you're listening on a replay, put in hashtag replay. If you're listening live, put in hashtag live. Let us know where you're coming in from as well. That would be phenomenal. It just means so much to me and Dr. Candy. So, Dr. Candy, what a name. Doctor and Candy.
I know. Well, only, that's another thing. Only my students had to call me doctor, but, as somebody else who had a doctorate said, you worked long and hard for that and you're still paying for it. You might as well use it.
Right. Exactly. Wow. So what do you have going on for today? What does a typical day look like for you?
My days are not typical. I have, like you, I am either a guest. Well, I don't have my own podcast anymore, but I'm guesting on a lot of podcasts. I'm working with the publisher because I turned in the manuscript in April, and here it is December, and we're still working on the technical parts of putting it out. But that's, when you have a mainline publisher, you have to be patient and wait. So I'm happy that Business Expert Press, in conjunction with Harvard Business Press, are publishing this book, Improv to Improve Your Leadership Team, which is, as we said, is pretty much focused on the business side, not specific to healthcare. It's a little bit more to the leaders in business, because that's where I started out. So to answer your question more specifically, there are meetings and then working on grants, because when I went to London in September, I was happy to meet with the Florence Nightingale Museum, and we decided to collaborate on some work. And so there's a lot of paperwork to complete to make this happen. And a New York solo theater festival has invited me.
Oh,
so I have to, well, I'm in the running, let's say. They've invited me to compete, and I'm in the running. So we'll see. That's another goal. You ask, what are the goals? The goal has always been to take the show to New York. So COVID sort of, had a little.
That would be awesome.
There. Yeah.
Wow. So I can't believe we're already at the end of our time. But what would you leave our audience members with?
I'm going to quote Florence Nightingale here.
How about that?
She said, be cautious with criticism and generous with praise, because there's no law against kindness.
Be cautious with criticism.
Generous with praise.
Generous with praise.
There's no law against kindness.
Yeah, that's good.
Well, she said against kindness there is no law, which is a, paraphrase of another scripture verse. But anyway.
I love it.
I think we need a lot more kindness in this world, don't you?
Yes, I would agree. I would agree. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Candy.
My pleasure. Thank you.
if you would hang out in the green room for me, and I'll be right back. I want to
Okay.
close out the show.
All right. Thanks, Brian.
Thank you. Wow. What a great show. What a great talk with Dr. Candy. I'm so appreciative of having her on. Just people like her that come on and lend so much to our viewing audience is phenomenal. So um, next week we have another special guest coming up, and that is Susan Fritzell. So Susan Fitzell. I'll make sure I pronounce her name right. But she is coming back on. She was on a few weeks ago. She'll be back on, and we're going to have a great conversation with her. So I'm looking forward to having her on, and hoping that you all will come on as well and talk with her as well. So thank you very much. And as always, remember to keep one eye on the road. Take care. We'll see you soon.